The valve sits on a velvet cloth under a desk lamp at the Royal Aircraft Establishment, Farnborough, and it weighs almost nothing. An engineer named Alec Thomas picks it up between two fingers, turns it toward the light, and sees that the stem has been drilled hollow, end to end, and packed with something that moves when he tilts it. Nobody in that room has ever held a valve that gurgles. It is October 1942, and 3 floors below, a Focke-Wulf FW-19 that force-landed at RAF Pembrey 4 months earlier is being stripped bolt by bolt. But it is this 2-ounce piece of metal, not the airframe, not the guns, not the cowling, that will end up rewriting how Britain builds aircraft engines for the rest of the war. The valve came out of the exhaust port of an engine built for a machine that had been humiliating fighter command since September. British and Canadian pilots flying Spitfire Mark IVs were coming home and reporting an enemy fighter that could outclimb them, outdive them, outroll them, and simply leave them behind above 15,000 feet. And nobody in London could explain it, because nobody had ever had one to open up. Then, on the 23rd of June, 1942, a German pilot named Armin Faber, disoriented after a dogfight over the Bristol Channel, mistook the Bristol Channel for the English Channel, throttled back, dropped his gear, and landed his FW-190A3 at RAF Pembrey in South Wales, taxiing right up to the flight line as if he owned the place. He handed the RAE the one aircraft they had been trying to get their hands on for a year, complete and undamaged, engine still warm. If you've made it this far, you're exactly who this channel is for. People who want the real engineering, not the highlight reel. Hit subscribe, because the story only gets stranger from here. And there's a lot more sitting in the archives. The engine underneath that cowling was a BMW 801, a 14-cylinder, twin-row, air-cooled radial. And the first thing the RAE's engine section did after Faber's aircraft reached Farnborough was run it on a testbed to confirm the horsepower figures British intelligence had estimated from captured documents. The numbers held up, something close to 1,700 horsepower for takeoff, more than either the Spitfire's Merlin or the Typhoon's Sabre could put out at the time, and squeezed into a cowling barely wider than the propeller spinner. A team led by engine specialist Alec Thomas began the teardown in a quiet corner of the engine sheds, working the same way a pathologist works a body. Piece by piece, in order, nothing skipped, everything logged. Between the second and third day of the teardown, Thomas's notebook has a line that has nothing to do with engineering. He'd sent a junior fitter out for tea twice, and both times it went cold on the bench before he touched it. That's not a detail from a memoir. It's in the workshop diary. Meanwhile, over the channel that same week, RAF fighter squadrons were still logging encounters where 19s dived away from Spitfires as if the British aircraft were standing still. And every one of those combat reports landed on a desk not far from where Thomas was working. The first layer to fall was the cowling itself. The team removed the engine cover and found a close-fitting fan, mounted directly behind the propeller, forcing air through ducting shape to route cooling flow around each cylinder bank individually rather than washing over the whole engine at once. British radials of the period relied on the aircraft's forward speed and open baffling to do that job. This fan worked the engine at any speed, including on the ground, including in a climb. Thomas wrote that the arrangement let BMW cowl the engine far tighter than drag alone would normally allow, cutting frontal area without starving the rear cylinders of air. The exact problem that had made earlier radial fighters draggy and hot running. The second layer was the ignition. Pulling the harness, they found not one magneto system feeding the spark plugs, but a fully duplicated set. 2 plugs per cylinder fed by 2 independent circuits, so that a single hit to the ignition wiring couldn't put the engine out. It was a design decision that cost weight and complexity for a single reason: combat survivability. And it told the RAE something about how BMW's engineers had been briefed. This was not an engine designed to be efficient in peacetime. It was designed to keep running with holes in it. It was the exhaust valve gear that stopped the teardown cold. Pulling the rocker covers on the front cylinder bank, the fitters lifted out valves that were noticeably lighter than anything in a Merlin or a Sabre, and when one of them shook a valve near his ear, he heard liquid moving inside the stem. Thomas had it sectioned that afternoon. The stem had been drilled hollow along almost its entire length, and part filled with metallic sodium, sealed under vacuum. A design detail that had appeared in some pre-war experimental literature, but that no one in the room had seen executed in a production fighter engine at this scale. Sodium melts at roughly 208 degrees Fahrenheit, well below the temperature the valve head reaches in a running engine. So in flight, the sodium inside that stem is liquid, and every time the valve opens and closes, it sloshes back and forth along the hollow bore like a tiny piston of metal soup, carrying heat away from the white-hot valve head and dumping it into the guide and the cylinder head, where the airflow from that tightly ducted cowling fan could carry it off. A solid valve stem moves heat by conduction alone, slowly, cylinder metal fighting cylinder metal. This one moved heat by convection, a liquid metal shuttle working every single stroke. One of the fitters set the sectioned valve down on the bench, sat back in his chair, and didn't say anything for a while. That's the moment recorded, not a quote, because nobody wrote down what he actually said. What the silence meant was clear enough to everyone else in the room. This single detail, buried inside a component most engineers never look at twice, was quietly enabling everything else about the airplane. The reason BMW could run the 801 at high boost, high RPM, and high compression without burning the exhaust valves off their seats. The reason that 1700 horsepower could survive sustained combat power settings that would have cooked a comparable British valve within hours, traced straight back to a few grams of sodium sealed inside a hollow stem. While the RAE worked through the head assembly, the 8th Air Force was still 6 weeks from flying its first heavy bomber mission over occupied Europe, and Fighter Command Spitfire squadrons were still absorbing 190 losses they couldn't fully explain to the Air Ministry, because the honest answer that the enemy engine could simply take more punishment for longer hadn't yet reached anyone outside that engine shed. The 4th layer came from measuring the valve seats and guides under magnification. British production tolerances on valve guide wear allowances were comparatively loose, built around the assumption that valves would be replaced on a predictable maintenance schedule. The BMW guides showed a wear pattern consistent with far higher operating temperatures sustained for far longer without seat recession. The valve simply wasn't degrading the way a conventional valve would under the same load, because it wasn't running anywhere near as hot at the seat, sodium having already carried the worst of the heat away before it ever reached that surface. Thomas's report noted, in the flat language of an engineering document, that British single-piece exhaust valves would very likely fail under the boost pressures the BMW 801 was running routinely. The 5th layer answered a question that had been sitting under the whole examination without anyone stating it directly. Why hadn't Rolls-Royce or Napier done this already? The RAE's metallurgists found the answer wasn't ignorance. Sodium-filled valves had been described in American and German technical papers through the 1930s, including work connected to aero engine research in the United States. The difficulty was never the concept. It was manufacturing a hollow stem to aviation tolerances, filling it with a metal that ignites on contact with water and burns violently in air, sealing it under vacuum so it never leaks. And doing all of that on a production line, turning out engines by the thousand, for a wartime economy already stretched thin on skilled labor. BMW had solved a production problem, not a physics problem, and that distinction changed how the RAE would talk about the whole engine. The sixth and final layer came from the compression ratio itself, run against the fuel BMW was using. Cross-referencing captured fuel samples with the engine's boost figures. The RAE's fuel chemists confirmed the 801 was operating on a lower octane fuel than the high-performance aviation Spirit Britain and the United States had access to by 1942, and it was still matching or beating British power outputs at comparable altitudes. The sodium valve was a direct part of the reason why. Without a way to shed exhaust valve heat that efficiently, BMW's engineers could not have pushed the compression and boost as far as they had on the fuel available to them. The valve wasn't a curiosity sitting inside the engine. It was one of the load-bearing decisions the entire performance figure rested on. By the middle of November 1942, the RAE's full report on the FW190 and its BMW 801 engine had circulated to the Ministry of Aircraft Production, to Rolls-Royce at Derby, and to Napier. The report didn't recommend admiration. It recommended action. Here is the finding stated plainly, the way Thomas himself stated it in the closing page of the engine report. The valve that made the FW190 possible to fly the way German pilots were flying, it was not a secret alloy. It was not a hidden fuel additive. It was 2 grams of sodium sealed in a hollow stem, sloshing back and forth 14 times over inside 14 cylinders, thousands of times a minute. Carrying heat, nobody in Britain had found a production line way to move that fast. Rolls-Royce began serious development work on sodium-cooled exhaust valves for the Merlin shortly after that report landed. Work that fed directly into the higher boost Merlin variants that powered later model Spitfires and the Merlin-engined Mustangs flying escort over Germany by 1944. Engines that could finally be pushed to combat power settings for longer without burning a valve. Napier's Sabre engine, dogged for 2 years by exhaust valve failures that had grounded entire Typhoon squadrons and cost pilots their lives in engine fires traced back to valve seat burn-through, adopted sodium cooling as part of the fix that turned the Typhoon from an unreliable liability into the tank-busting workhorse of 1944's ground attack squadrons over Normandy. A component nobody in the audience for a dogfight report would ever think to ask about had a direct line to how many British pilots came home from missions their engines weren't supposed to survive. That original FW190, the one Armin Faber landed by mistake at Pembrey, still exists. It hangs today in the Royal Air Force Museum in Cosford, repainted in its wartime markings, propeller still. Cowling closed over an engine most visitors walk straight past on their way to the next exhibit. Nobody looking up at it from the museum floor can see the valve gear buried inside that cowling, the hollow stems, the sealed sodium, the 2 grams of metal that quietly forced Rolls-Royce and Napier to rebuild engines that were already winning the war on paper and losing it in the air. The aircraft gets photographed for what it looks like. The war was actually changed by something inside it that nobody could see at all.